That's why my next player here is also going to be at the running back position. I'm selling Brian Robinson, and I know that he's off to a strong start this year. He's averaging 14.7 half PPR points per game, and that marks good for RB8 overall in points per game among running backs who have played in every game this season. And he's RB7 overall if you just want to go look at the raw point totals at the position so far in 2024. I know he's dealing with the knee injury that's popped up the last couple of weeks. Yeah, he was able to not practice for most of last week, still got on the field, still actually hit the end zone twice. Despite seeing just 7 carries. So the fantasy production for the week was there. He gave you a high floor. But I just think it's kind of all coming together where he's had a really strong start to the year. His value is up, and like I said, it's in season. These are the times where you sell productive running backs that aren't considered to be elite assets, kind of like a Jordan Mason. He's producing right now. He's 25 years old. He's attached to what looks like it's going to be a high scoring offense for a long time, or at least the next 2 years. He is under contract through 2025. So there are points that you can use to sell to your league mates to say like, hey, there are good things with this player. He's producing right now. You're probably selling him to a contending team, and in doing that, you could do what you get in return depends entirely on what your situation is. If you're rebuilding, it's a great time to go find a contender and go grab ideally a first round pick with a plus on top. If I'm selling him right now, I'm shooting for a 25 first and something else with it, maybe a 25 third or potentially a 26 second. Like I want to really capitalize on him while he's producing. And if I'm in win now mode, what I want to try to do is package him with something else and go upgrade at either running back or at a different position if I'm deep at back and I want to kind of grab a receiver, tight end, quarterback, and super flex, whatever the case may be. Either way, I'm just trying to maximize on this window for a guy that has really gone up in value from just based on the production that he's given us so far in 2024.
It's hard to move on from Brian Robinson as a contender just because he's been so good and that this offense looks like it's going to be good for the foreseeable future. So he's definitely a guy that's hard to move off of. But I was never a huge Brian Robinson Jr. I guess advocate, and I've been wrong. I mean, he's earned a role. He looks great this year, and he's the kind of player, like you said, Kamish, that I'm willing to kind of move off of by packaging him and a plus to up tier to a more stable, I guess, a more stable asset. So I definitely like that call. And then obviously as a rebuilder, if you can get any first for Brian Robinson, maybe a first and a little plus, I honestly wouldn't really care if it's too much of a plus. If I can get a 25 first and super flex for Brian Robinson, that's a pretty tantalizing offer considering that Brian Robinson coming into this year, you would dream of getting a 25 first for him. So I do think with the start he has, it's definitely a perfect sell opportunity because if he starts trending down or maybe Eckler gets a little more work, Jane Daniels maybe vultures more touchdowns around the goal line. Who knows? But right now he's definitely at the peak of his value, and now's the time to capitalize if you are willing to move off him.
Yeah, and that's why I think you can actually potentially get a 25 first from the right manager in win now mode that needs a running back where you could never have gotten it before. And I mean, just quickly to add a little more context to it, I mean, he's ranked as a back end RB1 in both Dynasty League football. Oh, sorry, as a back end RB2 in both Dynasty League football and Fantasy Pros Dynasty rankings. So, like the community, the experts anyway, on these sites still, despite his fast start, aren't that high on him. But as we know in the leagues that we play in, we're in season. People want points, especially contending teams. So I think that they're more likely to give more than you would think, or more than they would have 5, 6 weeks ago for guys that fall into this tier, and it's a buying opportunity if you want to go ahead and upgrade at the position. Aaron, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, no, I love this take because I mean let's face it, if you have Brian Robinson on your team starting, you most likely were not a juggernaut team, right? I mean, he you didn't have to pay a whole lot preseason to get him, right? And the perceived powerhouse teams are the people who had Bijan Robinson, right? So I mean
The
it's
wrong B Rob.
interesting.
Or B
I
Rob?
know the wrong B Rob where Brian's actually having better stats right now than Bijan, but you can never get that trade done still, to your point with dynasty value. So yeah, I love it from the lens of, you're probably a rebuilding team and yeah, just try to hunt down a contending team. And yeah, because his this is probably his peak value. You can get a pretty decent assets in a trade with. So yeah, if you can get a first and a piece, I would definitely smash that deal for sure.
Yeah, I have a couple of scenarios I want to run by you guys because right now on Keep Trade Cut crowdsourced data, right now Brian Robinson's RB 14, which is getting up there. So, do you think if a contender had Jonathan Brooks and you were like, you know what, I, I'll trade you my Brian Robinson Jr. straight up for your Jonathan Brooks, and if that as a contender, do you think that contender accepts that deal right now?
It depends entirely on what the contender's running back room looks like. I mean, and in your scenario, are you saying like the contending team is giving up Brian Robinson or getting
They're
Brian
they're
Robinson?
getting Brian Robinson, so they're bolstering their team. Let's say they're 4-1 right now, 5-0, whatever. They're
Sure.
they're they're going for it. I mean, right now Brian Robinson Jr. is one of the safest running backs in fantasy football
Sure.
in 2024.
Yeah, I think it's the time to ask that question. I mean, if they need the running back help and they don't want to wait for Brooks to get on the field in a handful of weeks, and maybe even when Brooks gets on the field, he's not completely supplanting Chuba Hubbard until the end of the year, if not until 2025, then I think this is the time to try to make that deal where you go ahead and you get a much better prospect in the form of Jonathan Brooks, a guy with a at least an equal, in theory, opportunity to be a bell cow in his backfield. I think now's the time to try to do that, whereas that would have been laughable deal to make a few weeks ago.
No, exactly. I mean, those are things that I kind of think about. It just like how can I capitalize on my investment that was Brian Robinson? How can I use that asset that's gained value and upgrade to, I think, a safer guy in Jonathan Brooks. Because right now, I mean, Chuba Hubbard looks pretty good too. So it's like maybe that manager's like, you know what? Maybe Chuba Hubbard and I mean, isn't just going to go away when Jonathan Brooks is is healthy and ready to go. And then this might sound crazy, and I would never do this, but do you think somebody would be crazy enough to sell after a tough couple of weeks for Brees Hall? Do you think Brian Robinson and a 25 first for Brees Hall? You think people are doing that?
I'm gonna let Aaron go first on this one.
With Brees Hall. No, I don't think there's. I can't see it happening. I mean, in any of the leagues that we're in, I mean, there's just, I mean, again, you just pay, you pay too much for Brees Hall. I mean, there's a lot of managers that just stick on to that value, whether or not they perform or not. So, I still think Hall is an elite talent, and I want to give him up for Brian Robinson in it first.
Yeah, the answer is no. I still don't think that's going to be on the
Agreed.
table, and I wouldn't do it either. But the real question is, if you really want to put the screws to us on this one, Ethan, I guess I'll do that for you. Is
Okay.
so, what if it's your contending team, you're sitting on Brees Hall, and someone who isn't really doing it at least the last 2 weeks, and they come to you and they say, okay, I'll give you Brian Robinson and a first round pick in 2025. What do you think then?
Brian Robinson and a 25 first for.
You're Brees Hall, who's not helping you as a contender.
Oh, I know. Like I said, I posed the question to you guys initially. I would reject it. Like I said, I was never a big Brian Robinson fan, but I'm still hitching my wagon to Brees Hall. He's too talented. He's too good. The thing is, a guy like Brees Hall, he's so insulated. Guys like Brian Robinson, they get hurt or they have a few down weeks, their value starts tanking. That's why these guys like yeah, exactly. These guys like Brees Hall, these insulated assets are so valuable because you know what? They can withstand injuries, they can withstand bad performances. Where guys like Jordan Mason, Brian Robinson Jr., they get hurt and miss time. The dynasty community forgets about them very, very fast, and their value just tanks. So that's why it's like you got to be able to react in dynasty. You got to sell. Sometimes these sell windows are so small, and you got to make moves rather quick because once you miss that sell window, you might have an aging dying asset on your team.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that Brian Robinson was the perfect guy to sell at this particular moment in time because his value was up, because he's scoring points each and every week, giving you those high floor games. And this is the time right now to get a player like that off of your team and pivot over to a safer asset that's going to have more long-term value and hopefully someone who can continue to score points for you in 2024. But that was a really fast, fun, quick hitting episode on some buys and some sells. Really fun to cover all that, folks. We're going to do more Dynasty content in season than we have at any point in the past on the dynasty front. So we're looking forward to all that, folks. If you like what you saw, click that subscribe button. We're going to talk redraft, DFS, dynasty, everything fantasy football related. The season's in full swing, so we couldn't be having any more fun than we are right now. But until next time, folks, peace.